Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Today's show is called Final Showdown for the state Senate seat, and it focuses on the contest for the new Senate District 9 that has been created through this year's legislative redistricting. My guest right now is Andy Sanborn of Bedford, who is the Republican nominee for the seat. Andy has a long corporate background in finance and in economics, is a wide-ranging business entrepreneur, is a small business owner, including co-owning with his wife the Draft, which is a very popular Concord restaurant that employs dozens of people. As a citizen activist in 2009, he formed a statewide coalition of small business owners to overcome the really onerous LLC tax being inflicted on small businesses. Andy already has experience in the Senate. In fact, he has served for the past 2 years in the New Hampshire State Senate. Now, I don't want to use valuable time today because we are limited time-wise, as you know. So I don't want to repeat all of the biographical information and accomplishments that I talked about in my previous show with Andy. So what I'd ask you to do is go to the BCTV website, www.bedfordtv.com, and watch my previous show with him. When you get there, click on channel 16, click on video on demand. You'll see a search box on the upper left of the new page. Type in Tell It Like It Is, click on that go button. A list of shows will come up, and you will see Race for the New Hampshire Senate with Andy Sanborn. Watch it. It will tell you so much about his background and his ideas. So, with that, going straight to Andy, he has a ton of stuff he wants to talk about. Andy, thanks for coming back.
Thanks so much for having me today.
Good to see you. I know you're going 1,000 miles an hour these days.
Yep.
Big
sure,
campaign, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, you just came out of what some people would describe as maybe a bruising Republican primary contest, although you don't look bruised at all. You look very healthy. And a lot of emphasis, I think more by Democrats, was put on the length of your residency in Bedford rather than on the fact that you actually are bringing Senate experience to the job if you're elected. How do you think that Senate experience will serve us now, and what have you done to familiarize yourself with the issues and concerns of people in what is a brand new Senate district?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me today. And,
my pleasure.
You know, Kathy, as you know, every 10 years we have to redraw all the Senate lines, and this new District Number 9 encompassing primarily towns that have never been represented together before. This new district starts in Bedford and goes all the way southwest of Keene. Now, as some people know, they may have seen my wife and myself scootering around the neighborhood because
I actually did see you one day.
Yes, ma'am. You know, we made a decision, and when I first became politically active, I believe you have an obligation to meet people, show up to their door face to face, so they know who you are, they know what you stand for, and they know how to get in touch with you. Bedford voters feel the same way. You know, we've gone door to door for months now throughout this entire campaign and talked to people about the issues that affect them. Being a state senator, I think and believe that I have an understanding of some of the wide-ranging issues, and we have to remember that what affects us affects all of us. You know, it's part of what the state Senate is. There's 24 of us with 24 equally sized districts, and everything we vote on, we're essentially voting for the entire state. So even working as a senator in a district that didn't include Bedford last time, we dealt with issues that did. And at the end of the day, every single time, people always wanted to know, can you do the job? Do you have the experience? Do you have solutions to our problems? And are you the right person that will represent us correctly up in Concord? And I believe I'm that guy.
Any guess how many doors you knocked on?
We've exceeded 4,000 doors so far. And
4,000?
4,000 doors throughout the district so far.
That's a lot of doors.
It's a lot of doors. And we've set a goal that we're going to actually try and knock on 6,000 individual doors before the election on November 6th.
How many pairs of sneakers have you gone through?
Well, actually, I've gone through 2 pairs of sneakers. We were talking about it the other day, and as you know, we use these little scooters, and I sometimes tend to drag my feet.
Yeah, they're kind of cute with those signs and everything on them. Yeah,
Yes.
you certainly do attract attention.
It makes it easy. It makes it quick. It allows you to get in and out of driveways. It's really fuel efficient. Everyone knows how frugal I am, and they get like 100 miles a gallon, and it's a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, Yeah, and as I said, it does attract attention, certainly.
Yes, ma'am.
Very nice. Now, you have taken on the mantra, as most candidates have on both sides of the aisle, that you're opposed to the imposition of a state income tax and a state sales tax in New Hampshire. And one of the things that I listened to you carefully say was that the state generates sufficient income, it just needs to spend less. Tell us about some of the inefficiencies in state government that waste our money, and the type of things you've been doing about that and will be doing about that.
Sure. We have to remember that the population in the state of New Hampshire really hasn't grown a lot in the past 10 to 15 years. We have about 1.3 million people that live here. But 12 years ago, our state budget was only about $6 billion. And today, it's almost $12 billion. So when we consider that we have no increase in population, and looking at even the increases in the consumer price index, our budget has continued to accelerate at almost 3 times the CPI. We're just spending more money. Now, you hear a lot of people would suggest that they're against a sales tax or they're against an income tax. And obviously, I've signed the pledge, and I am against the sales tax, and I am against an income tax. But in addition to that, I think we need to pay very close attention to all of the other taxes, fees, fines, and penalties that have
wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, they've kind of slid through our legislature. Just in the last 4 years, when the Democrats had control of the legislature, they raised almost 100 new taxes, fees, and fines. 100. They generated almost $350 million more dollars in new taxes on the residents of New Hampshire. So at some level, I'm always cautious whenever anyone says, well, gee, I'm against a sales or an income tax, but then they run around behind the scenes and pass tax after tax after tax. Now, I've been very clear. I will not support any increase in any taxes, not just sales and income tax. We don't need any more money in our state. We're generating sufficient resources to meet the needs of the state. In fact, I would contend that we're spending people's tax dollars unwisely at this point, because our state government's become so inefficient. I believe that's the #1 thing we should be working on today, is making our government work better with your tax dollars, about going back and finding efficiencies and finding modernization to really respect you as a taxpayer and respect your money.
That's staggering, 100, over 100. And, it's funny because, when people hear tax, whether it's cigarette tax or motor vehicle tax or whatever kind of tax it is, they react. But it seems funny that people don't understand fee means the same thing as tax. They're just kind of calling it a fee so that we don't react strongly. Right,
and that's why I tend to use the vernacular when I talk about it. I talk about fees, fines, penalties, and assessments.
Yeah.
You find that government or those who want to find a new way to take money out of your pocket, they'll find different ways to call it something. But if government's taking money out of your pocket, we can call it whatever you want to call it, but they're still taking money, and it's essentially a tax. So we need to make sure they're being good with it. Today, we have over 406 individual taxes that our government is levying on the people of New Hampshire.
Are you serious?
Yes, ma'am. I think that's a lot.
Yeah.
I think our taxes...
I had no idea what that meant.
We used to be known as a frugal state, and most people know that as a state senator, I'm one of the most frugal state senators we have.
So we can call you cheap.
You can call me cheap, you can call me a curmudgeon. Most people call me pretty darn frugal. And most of that comes from my traditional New Hampshire Yankee values of, if you're going to spend someone else's money, you have an obligation in politics. You should have an obligation in politics to spend it really wisely and just really stretch the dollar as far as you can. And I just don't see our government doing that today. One of the frustrations that led me to run for office was I felt that our government wasn't listening to us any day. I felt it wasn't respecting us, and beyond question, I don't think it's respecting our tax dollars. And as a small business owner, as a 4th-generation native, there's only so much of that you want to take. And being a good Irishman, I drew my line in the sand and made that decision to get involved, because we need to make our government respect us, listen to us, and be good with our money. And we're bringing some real efficiencies, and we're really working on making government better with your tax dollars.
I'm still sitting here staggered that there are over 400 different taxes, fines, fees, and assessments.
And it's not even just the sheer number of them.
That's staggering.
It's not just the sheer number of them. It's the fact that they have all gone up so much, year after year after year.
Yeah, they never stay the same, do they?
They never seem to go down.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
in this past legislature, that when I got elected in 2010, we came together for the House, and we finally had that kind of reasonable, rational thought process that said, wait a second, we need to put the brakes on this.
Mm-hmm.
Government spending is out of control. We're living beyond our means. Our state is facing a deficit of $800 to $900 million. Our state never ran like this before. It isn't what people from New Hampshire expect. People expect us to live within our means. We have a philosophy in New Hampshire that we all tend to be pretty frugal, and we feel that we're better with the money staying in our pockets versus sending it to the government. Unfortunately, again, as I'd mentioned, under the Democrat control, we kind of lost that a little bit. Mm-hmm. But in the past 2 years, we've really focused on it. We've cut dozens of taxes. We're really taking a very hard look at how competitive we are today, not just in New Hampshire, but with other states, and where our taxes are. And honestly, we can do some more work in there, and that's one of the things I promise to do if I get back to the legislature. Cut your taxes. Here's my pledge, ladies and gentlemen. I will fight to cut your taxes.
I personally like that a lot.
Thank you very much.
Now, your opponent did say in an interview with me, actually, that I don't know if you watched it or not, but that he, and I'm talking the interviews that I did back a few weeks ago with both of you, that he doesn't think that changing the state's business tax structure is necessarily a factor in improving the state's economy. What do you say to that?
Well, this is one of the places where my opponent and I disagree. He's a fine gentleman, but we have a very strong disagreement of taxation and regulation for the people and the businesses of this state. He has come out and saying that he's against requiring a supermajority to raise your tax. And he's even gone far enough to say that he wants to make sure we stay open to the necessity of raising more taxes, which, is kind of liberal speak for saying, hey, if I get in, I'm going to raise your taxes, or I'm going to raise fees or fines or penalties. We're obviously very, very different in that, because I don't believe we should be raising taxes. In fact, as I say regularly, I think we need to start cutting them. And it's a philosophical thing. On a business perspective, we know, or have heard in the past couple of years, that as of 2010, New Hampshire had fallen to be the worst place in America when it comes to business taxes. Dead last, 50th. We have the highest business taxes in America. Now, over the past 2 years, from 2010 to 2012, when we retook control of the House and the Senate, we were able to rein that back in, make it better for the business community, and we've improved that number dramatically. Now, we've moved up a number of spaces, but we have a lot more to go. Because at the end of the day, it's the business community that hires people. They need to have that ability to do so. They need to be competitive. And we need to get government out of the way and let businesses work so we can get our friends and neighbors back to work. That's the most important thing we're facing today.
How do we create jobs in New Hampshire? We all know that we need to do this. What's the best modus operandi leading to that?
I can tell you how we don't create jobs. We don't create jobs when we let government get in the way. We have to understand that government doesn't create any jobs. They can either make it easier for the business community to create jobs or make it much more difficult. And over the past 10 years, we've seen a government that continues to get in the way with regulation, with taxation, with so much duplication, it is virtually impossible to start or be successful in a business today. We hear it from every business owner across the state and across the nation. It's so difficult today to start or run a business. And the number one reason for that continues to be our government's become too big, too broad, too bold, and too invasive into the interaction of letting businesses run. I'm a fourth generation native. My family came here in 1840. My grandfather got a job in the middle of the Depression carrying coal down the street in a bucket, and he ended up owning the company, and my family had it for 65 years. We as a people, we have an ethical code, we have a moral code, and we do the right thing. And when we think about the success of American entrepreneurism before the hand of government like it is today, On a cultural basis, today we have a government that is really just trying to look at the business community as a revenue source, to find new ways to suck money back out of them, which makes it so much more difficult for businesses to grow or to expand, when this is the time right now we need businesses to prosper so they can get people back to work.
You're right. You know, before you even ran for the state senate, you became extraordinarily well known with small businessmen in the state, because you kind of jumped in and worked on that whole LLC tax fiasco and put together a very large statewide coalition, what, of hundreds of businesses, correct?
Yeah, we actually pulled together 3,500 small business
3,500?
3,500 small business owners.
That's a lot.
You know, again,
to get that many businesses, small business owners, to agree on anything is quite a feat in itself.
I think it more tells just the level of angst in the business community today. On one hand, again, we go back to that pledge. Should we have a sales tax? Should we have an income tax? And I've signed the pledge, we shouldn't have it. But this was a case where government, you know, where politicians at one level said, look, we're not going to have a sales or income tax. But then they find another way to call it something different and actually create it. That piece of legislation that Maggie Hassan brought forward was going to put a
Was that her legislation?
She was majority leader of the Senate.
Really?
Put a 13.5% income tax just on the backs of the small business community.
13.5 is high.
13.5% would instantly, not only just high, make it one of the highest in the country.
Really?
But you have to remember that they were specifically targeting one group of people. They weren't saying that, you know, doctors over at the Elliott should have a 13.5% income tax, or that large corporations like BAE shouldn't have a 13% income tax. Only small business owners, a 13.5% income tax. That's what the Democrats brought to us back in 2009. It is so fundamentally wrong. It is so against everything we believe in. So even though I brought together 3,500 small businesses, had we had more time, we would have brought more, because it's just so counter to the culture of what we believe in. You know, I'm proud to have stood up for it. I think it shows my resolve and my willingness to stand up for the things that I think are right and fight for the values that we believe in.
I mean, to me, that just the sound of 13.5%. You know, my husband and I have owned small businesses, and to me, a tax like that could be the tipping point as to whether or not a small business can continue to stay in business.
Oh, I believe it's 13.5%, I think, is beyond just the tipping point. It would have shattered our economy. We all understand that. That's why we all came together. We fought hard, and we forced the governor to repeal a law he had just passed, because just truly would have desecrated our economy around here.
Wow. And I mean, I think a lot of people too, when they hear employers, they think of the big companies, you know, that employ a lot of people, hundreds of people or whatever. But I mean, in fact, in New Hampshire, it really is the small business, isn't it, that's the economic engine? Oh,
85% of our economy is made up of truly the small business owner. The guy or the gal with, you know, 1 to 6 or 1 to 10 employees. We're a small state that way. We don't have a lot of manufacturing. You know, we obviously have a right to work issue that's still bopping around our state a little bit. We've never had that large, big, wide manufacturing base. So our technology, both in software and high tech and light manufacturing, as well as tourism and retail, is made up of small companies. That is our economy. So anytime you push back on the small business owners of New Hampshire, it can really hurt.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up, and because healthcare, I know, has been a big thing for you since you've been in the Senate. And at the last time we talked here, I really don't remember offhand if the Supreme Court had already made its decision on Obamacare. Obviously, at least for now, Obamacare is continuing on due to the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. Of course, that possibly could change in the future depending on the election results. But one way or another, what does the New Hampshire legislature need to do now about these health care issues? You know, and again, I know that Obamacare continues to be a source of confusion for probably most people, but it would seem as though the state still has some opportunities there to better service than Obamacare will.
There's no question. You know, when Obamacare started, remember, it was called the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, right.
And I'm still trying to find that affordable part, because ever since this whole thing started, my health insurance costs for my employees has gone up over 50%. So I don't see a lot of...
Over 50%?
Over 50%. So I don't see a lot of...
That's a ton of money.
It's a ton of money.
You mean on monthly premiums?
Yes, ma'am. I don't see a lot of affordability in the quote-unquote Affordable Care Act. In fact, there hasn't been any affordability to it. Beyond question, it will be one of the most expensive, economically damaging things that will ever happen to our country and to our state. The mandates, the requirements, the costs are going to be overwhelming, and we have to do something about that. You know, our healthcare costs are out of control. Second biggest thing that all of us hear about as senators, second biggest thing we work on. There is so much we can do at the state level to cut your healthcare costs. You know, I introduced legislation last year. If we remember, 25 years ago, we had over 20 different healthcare carriers in our state competing for our trust in our business. It was a competitive market. It utilized the free market. And today, solely and specifically, as a result of legislative action, as a result of politicians, we're down to 2.5 healthcare carriers in our state who are mandated by law to charge the same amount. You know, we have one of the oldest populations in America.
So no competition.
Not only no competition, we have one of the oldest populations in America. We have one of the healthiest populations in America, but yet our healthcare costs are among the highest anywhere in the land, solely as a result of legislative action. This is something we can fix. This is something I pledge to people in Bedford, in District 9, in the state of New Hampshire. If I'm lucky enough to get your support, I will fight with everything I have to cut your healthcare costs, because we can do it in this state. You know, Ovid and I have worked a lot on this. We've talked about it a lot. We need to go back and knock down those borders. We need to allow free market to come back in and show some competition in healthcare costs. You can do it with your car insurance. You can do it with your home insurance. You can do it with your life insurance. So why can't we find competition in health insurance? It's something we can do, something we should do. It's something I'll fight hard for if I get reelected.
Don't you think, too, we should be able to kind of select our own level of coverage? I mean, obviously, a young family has one set of needs. An older couple facing various age-related issues has another set of needs. But your average, maybe 35-year-old single person, a 30-year-old, or whatever, doesn't have the needs of either of those groups. And I mean, we could go on and on.
We have to remember, you know, what is insurance? It's a pooling, right? It's a bunch of people coming together to pool their money to make sure we can cover the costs of everyone. One of the biggest fears and concerns I have about that is the pool now getting so small, we're not putting enough money in the pool to help everybody. We call that adverse selection. And you're hitting on a very key point. Again, specifically as a result of legislative action, we've required every policy to be virtually identical. Now, if you've got kids out there that are in college or just out of college and, you know, they think they're going to live forever, they might not need a policy that has all the bells and all the whistles that someone like I would have. And we know I've had some health issues. So I'm going to want that good, big, expensive Cadillac version of policy, but someone else might want to look just for catastrophic coverage or just for something much more simple. Well, of course, our legislature doesn't allow that to happen today. I think that's a fundamentally wrong product, because it tells those people that, hey, you know, they can only buy insurance if it's the big expensive one. And if they can't afford it, they drop out. So I see more people falling out of insurance today just because they can't afford it. And I believe if we could find a smaller, stripped down version of it, we could actually expand the pool, put more people into it, and again, lower your healthcare costs.
Now, we're kind of getting into the final stretch of the show here. And when I select questions, you know, to ask candidates, at this stage of the game, candidates for the same race aren't necessarily getting the same questions because I want, you know, people to be able to talk about their own platforms. So I try to pick some issues that are kind of general interest to all viewers, and also try to pick issues that go straight to the heart of that candidate's message. And I'm sure that I managed to not get all of the messages in that a candidate wants to get across.
You get most of them in. You're awesome at this.
Well, no, but I want to now say to you what we didn't bring up that is important to you. I want to give you your time now to get into those things that we didn't talk about that you see as critical, crucial, part of your plan, and part of the reason why people should vote for you.
Sure. Thank you so much. And everyone listening out there today, again, thanks so much for tuning in and listening to our conversation of telling it like it is. You know, I'm not a politician. Honestly, never wanted to be a politician. But 5 years ago, I woke up and I had just had it. As a fourth generation native, as a small business owner, I just saw us losing those values, losing that belief that we're a traditionally frugal state that really believes in people's personal freedoms and personal responsibilities. We just weren't on the right track. Fighting for businesses, arguing with the state government on such a regular basis, it made me upset. And as I say, I'm Irish, so I drew my line in the sand and I made a decision that I was going to enter into the political world and run for state senate, and became one of our state senators. You know, over the past 2 years, I've had an amazing experience to work with some wonderful people in the Senate and the House. And we're really trying to realign how our government operates. You know, we need to go back and have this real cultural conversation about what is the role of government. I believe it's government's role to make sure everyone's feet is equal distance to the fire, because we're seeing all types of, you know, different opportunities and different requirements depending upon what industry you're in or who you're in. And I just don't believe that's the role of government. We can have the policy discussion as how close everyone's feet should be, but there needs to be some recognition of equality in there, and I think we've lost that. Our government has turned into an entity that wants to help people. To a large degree today, it's just looking like a self-preservation entity that is just trying to find a way to survive. And government's way to survive is just to find new ways to find fees, fines, taxes, and penalties, and to raise them all the time to feed its never-ending thirst for more money. We can be more frugal. We can be better with your money. We can have a government that listens to you, that respects you, and understands its role. There are certain things that we should be focusing on, helping those most in need, making sure that there's protection, making sure that our roads are done. So for me, becoming a state senator and getting involved is really about finding a way to make government work better with your money, about respecting your personal beliefs and understanding that we are all individuals and we should be able to deal with that. As it relates specifically to taxation, our government's reached the point where it's taxing us too much. We need to force it to be smaller, to be more responsive, and to be better with your money, and then we can go and cut taxes. So if I'm lucky enough to get your support to get back into the state senate again, you know, our number one thing beyond questions, jobs, 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 jobs. Getting government out of the way so we can create jobs and get our friends and neighbors back to work. Number two, we need to work on lowering your health insurance costs. There's ways we can do it. There's ways we can make it better for you. And I pledge with that and working to cut your taxes, we're going to make New Hampshire great again. Thanks so much for your time.
You did a great job staying on the time frame.
Thank you so much.
Tremendous. I have to thank you for coming again, because I know that it really got into your schedule and you're keeping a totally wild one.
We're working hard for this race to prove to the voters it's all good.
Hey, best of luck with the rest of the campaign. I'm sure I'll see you buzzing all over town on motor scooters and otherwise.
Yes, you will. I appreciate the time.
Well, I appreciate your coming in. Okay, we're at the end of another great interview. Andy certainly tells it like it is, which is what we're all about here, telling it like it is. I want you to go on to his website, www.andysanborn.com. That will appear on the screen, as will his phone number that he's very good about giving out, his private cell phone number. So we're at the end of another show. Please, you tell it like it is. We have a very important election season coming up, and don't forget to vote. And until the next time, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.